to our fifth geoscience workshop or research project workshop. What we're going to be covering today mainly is looking at the abstract. What is an abstract? How do you write it? What do you include? And these are community norms. Again, keep focused, strive to understand multiple perspectives, be willing to be disturbed or change your mind, critique ideas and concepts, not people, share the space, stay engaged in the work, and respect each other's time, recognize when each of us needs space, accept non-closure, apologize, and work to repair damage if you violate a norm. Before we begin, who can summarize what we covered in the last workshop? Feel free to unmute or put it in the chat. And again, these photos are here to provide some clues or reminders of what we did in the last workshop. Who recalls what we did in the last workshop? I think Aiden was in the workshop last time. Aiden, are you able to summarize what we did at the last workshop? No worries. It's been some time. Let's see who else was there. Amelia was there, but I know Amelia was coming in late, so I don't know if Amelia remembers. Or Dennis.
Carol?
Yes.
I wasn't in the last meeting, but also, I don't even know if this is like the time to say this, but when you normally do the meetings, I'm in medical, so I'm never really able to attend. So, I was wondering if you could send me the videos and stuff of the last few meetings.
Yeah, I'll show it at the end, but we are putting the meeting videos on the website, also on YouTube, but it's easier to find on our website, obviously, because you can search NASEP and find it. But yeah, I'll send them out with the links and whatnot. And then usually after each session on Wednesday, because most of the workshops are on Tuesday, except we did have that one on Wednesday. I send out the slides and the video link. So it might be in an email from the previous times. But yeah, thank you for letting me know. I know that you all are busy with different things, including sports, extracurricular activities, youth councils, and whatnot. So I thank you all for taking the time to be here and understand that sometimes there's conflict. So no worries. I'll make sure to share that at the end. And if I forget, please remind me. I can go ahead and just sort of summarize what we did in the last workshop. So in the last workshop, we talked about going over your results after you've collected your data and did your experiment, what that looks like in terms of turning your results into visual things like graphs, bar graphs, pie graphs, different things depending on what you're looking at, or looking at those different themes that you may have identified if you're doing something that's not numbers based, Excel numbers, and I forget, I think it's called Sheets for um, Google. Google Sheets are great ways to input data, and it has some helpful tools for doing things like averages, standard deviations, and some of those calculations that you might need for your results. It depends on what type of experiment you're doing and some of the calculations that you would do, but Yeah, those tools are really helpful in calculating some of those things or generating those visuals. And after having your results, how do you present those results in your conclusion? So, summarizing what you found, including the things that you found, and bringing in like literature or other things that you found in other articles to say, like, I believe that this is why my results came out this way, or they weren't what I expected, and this article says that this could be why. Um, and so going through those steps of having your results and figuring out how you process your results and communicate them is basically what we talked about in the last session. Does anyone have any questions about that?
No, thank you.
Great, thanks. Cool. So what we're talking about next, um, after the data collection, after the conclusions, is creating that abstract. So has anyone here heard of an abstract? Anyone heard of an abstract? You can raise your hands. You could put it in the chat. Has anyone heard of an abstract? Well, if you haven't heard of an abstract, this video here is going to sort of cover what it is. I want to make sure that the sound comes on. Can you hear this? You couldn't hear that? Okay. Let's watch it on YouTube then. Okay. Okay. What about now? Can you hear this?
Hi, I'm Dr. Chrissy O'Malley, and this is Better Science Teaching. Today, what I'd like to talk to you a little bit about is how to write your abstract for science fair. Abstracts turn out to be really important in some cases because that's the thing that a lot of judges are going to see first about your project. And this year, particularly in submitting things virtually, that's going to be a document that a lot of folks look at when they're either giving you an initial score or they're considering you for a special award. So pay careful attention to your abstract because it turns out to be really important for making a good impression about your project with other folks. When you're preparing your abstract, what you're actually doing is writing a concise summary of the paper that you've already produced. So if you're a student in one of my classes, you've already written your paper before we even discuss what an abstract is. It needs to be a summary that includes 4 basic things. 1, your purpose, why you did your project. 2, your procedure, how did you come by answering the questions that you asked, and why you did your project. Thirdly, your results. What things did you measure and what relationships did you find? And 4, your conclusions, or what are the things that you can learn from your project and apply to other things. When I was a student myself back in 8th grade, our teacher used to call this PPRC. So that was how we always wrote papers, was our purpose, procedure, results, and conclusions. And that's a really good way to think about your abstract. Your abstract should ideally be under 250 words. I have had students who struggle to write about those four main ideas with so few words. It is challenging, it's difficult. But for scientific writing and being able to express your ideas, it's really helpful because the abstract needs to be something that your reader can read quickly and understand easily. And so it needs to be very digestible. And usually, if you are willing to give up some words, you can get to something that people can understand quickly. Without bogging down on a lot of details. And what ends up happening with abstracts is if your summary is well written, it's usually an indication that you have a well written paper and it can draw people in who are interested in the topic that you chose. There are a lot of folks who have a habit of writing an abstract before they've written a paper. So, for instance, when scientists are presenting at conferences, sometimes the abstract gets written before the rest of the paper or before the presentation that they're going to give. This is something that sometimes happens. It's a little bit stressful, to be honest. But if you are a student who's working on a science fair project, there's no reason why you need to be pushed to do your abstract first. So you guys should be in a really good position to write a great abstract. Make sure, again, when you write your abstract that you're including the principal objectives and possibly even the scope of your experimentation, that you're also including the methods that you use, you're summarizing the results, and you're giving your principal conclusions. Those things, of course, should all be repeated with more detail later on in your paper. That's the way that papers should be written. It's better to have a shorter abstract than a longer one. So if you are concerned that your paper is not long enough, if you were concerned that your abstract is not long enough, that's probably just fine. Having a shorter abstract is better than having one that's too long. Keep in mind too that your abstract will often be published or shared with someone or read aside from your paper. So you want to make sure that when you are writing your abstract that you're not citing things that are in your paper or other resources or references outside of it that you need, because you're not going to have your works cited or your reference page attached to your abstract. It needs to be able to stand alone as its own document. It's basically like the written elevator speech of your project. So I hope that that helps you with writing your abstract, and make sure that you keep it concise and keep it short. And good luck with your science fair projects this year. For our school, it's middle of February, so we are right down to the wire.
Great. So I'm going to switch between screens again. But as I switch, start thinking about some takeaways from that video, because we're going to share out about those items that we learned. All right, so that was the video.
Hi.
Okay, yes, so what are some things that we learned? You can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Keep it short. Yep, it's concise, a concise document, so you do want to keep it short. Thank you. Make your point clear. Yep, you have limited words that you can use, so you have to make sure that everything is precise and clear. What else? What else? What were some things to include in the abstract? What are the main things to include in the abstract? And who remembers about how many words? It changes depending on where you're publishing, but in terms of the International Science and Engineering Fair, they have the same one that was listed in the video. 250. Yep, 250. Some do have 150, but thankfully they give you 100 more words. So yes, it was 250. And within those 250 words, what were items that you made sure to include? She gave an acronym. It had 4 letters. What were the 4 letters? And that's not like the main rule, but I do think it was helpful. to think. It was PPRC. Yep, PPRC, Memphis had it. What does PPRC stand for? Yep, conclusion is one. Three dots, still thinking. Yep, conclusions is one. Purpose results, yep. What's the last P? Procedure, yep. So it's purpose, procedure, results, conclusion, right? And I like that that's something that her teacher said and she remembered since eighth grade. So that's useful to think about. Some people might say to like include your hypothesis, but that could also be like the part of the purpose, your why you're doing it. So um, there's there's going to be different things that you hear, but I think PPRC is a great um, outline to include. And as we saw as we were doing the hypothesis, the research question, and the purpose, those things are all interlinked. So putting them together as purpose is fine for me, at least. Anything else that folks saw? I think that pretty much covered most of it. Let me see what I put down. It's the thing that judges see first, and that's true. Before they even look at your slides or your poster, they're like, okay, I want to know what this is about. The abstract is going to give me a high level view of overview of what this project is about. So they're going to read it. So you want to make sure that it covers the different things within your project in a way that's thoughtful. If you start early and you do a lot of edits with it, it's easier to bring down your word count so that you can add more information in there that's useful for the judges. So editing is very important. Um, so that goes into the part about being concise, as many of you said. Um, and it's often what people see when they're giving you your score for your science fair project, and also what they look at when giving consideration for like a special award within at least the SARSEF science fair. Um, they have the grand awards, right? The ones that take you to the level of going on to the International Science Fair and competing there. But there's also special awards. So I think like the Air Force has an award, the Saguaro Society gives an award for different things related to the environment. I think that the like wildlife groups do as well. So there's special awards that different groups sponsor, and they're like, I want to have this award to give towards a project that's related to engineering, chemistry, the environment, or whatever. And so when they're looking at who they want to give those awards to, they'll also look at your abstract. You all mentioned the purpose, procedure, results, and conclusions. That's great. We'll look at some examples later on to see how that's incorporated into an abstract with a few examples. And then also that an abstract is an independent document. So you don't want to cite things in there because it's to stand alone from um, the journal article. They should be able to read your abstract and understand what's happening without having to go outside to look at these references and different things like that, excuse me. And I also say that that's the same for tables and graphs and things. Having your titles and your units of measurement and everything else labeled, your axes, is important because if they look at the table, they should be able to understand what information is being given in that table without looking at your paper or your presentation and things like that. So yeah. Other things to consider that were included in the video is the 250 words maximum, not minimum. As the presenter in that video said, you don't have to meet 250 words exactly. If you're under, that's fine. And these abstracts are often submitted online to the fair site when registering. So we'll help you do that when you register for your science fair. And within this science fair, or the abstract, it's basically a summary of the different things you did, you found, and your conclusions within your project. Usually it's all put together in one big sort of paragraph and not sectioned out individually, but that really depends on where you're submitting it to. I've seen journal articles that do have it split up with different subheadings and things, so it really depends on where you're submitting it, but for ISEF, it's all together. And yeah, proofreading is going to be very important because of that word count. And if you do slim it down, you can add more information that's valuable and take out some of the fluff. So here is an abstract example, and this is from Ryan Emanuel, Martha A. Carretta, and Pavritra Vaswadan. And their paper is Natural Gas Gathering and Transmission Pipelines and Social Vulnerability in the United States. That's the topic of their paper. I'm going to get a sip of water, but you can start reading this and I'll read it in a moment. But what I'm wanting you all to do as you read this is to identify PPRC. So the purpose, procedure, results, and conclusion. So in your mind, say like, okay, this is where the purpose is, this is where the procedure is, this is where the results are, and this is where the conclusion is. All right, so it says, midstream oil and gas infrastructure comprises vast networks of gathering and transmission pipelines that connect upstream extraction to downstream consumption. In the United States, public policies and corporate decisions have prompted a wave of proposals for new gathering and transmission pipelines in recent years, raising the question, who bears the burdens associated with the existing pipeline infrastructure in the U.S.? With this in mind, we examined the density of natural gas gathering and transmission pipelines in the U.S. together with county-level data and social vulnerability. For the 2,261 U.S. counties containing natural gas pipelines, we found a positive correlation between county-level pipeline density and an index of social vulnerability. In general, counties with more social vulnerable populations have significantly higher pipeline densities than counties with less socially vulnerable populations. In particular, counties in the top quartile of social vulnerability tend to have pipeline densities that are much higher than pipeline densities for counties in the bottom quartile of social vulnerability. The difference grows larger for counties at the upper extremes of pipeline density within each group. We discussed some of the implications for the indigenous communities and others affected by recent expansions of oil infrastructure and oil and gas infrastructure. This thing needs to go away because I can't read under it. We offer recommendations aimed at improving ways in which decision makers identify and address the social impacts and social justice implications. I cannot read behind that. I think there's two words, pipeline infrastructure. Because this, let me see if I can see it on this side. We offer recommendations aimed at improving ways in which decision makers identify and address the societal impacts and environmental justice implications of mainstream pipeline infrastructure. Got it. Okay. So that was 22 words total here. 22 words. They have 28 words to play with, but they are under. So where did they have their purpose? You can say, you could put the first few words of the sentence with two dots or three dots at the end if you want to respond in the chat rather than typing the whole thing out, or you can unmute. But where is the purpose? What would you consider the start of the purpose in this paper or abstract? Where do you think the purpose is? Does anyone think that it started here, midstream oil and gas infrastructure? Is it here? What do you think? What about if we're still thinking about the purpose, where do you think the procedure started? Or did you not think that they included it in here? Because sometimes you never know. What about the results? Does anyone know where the results started? Or conclusions? What do you all think this part is right here? Oh, I got something in the chat. Okay, let's see. I think that the procedure starts around with this in mind. So with this in mind, we examine the density of natural gas and transmission. That's a good guess. So right here, you think that the procedure, oh, procedure. Hopefully you all can read that. Yep, I think that as well. Procedure. And that's all they really kind of mention for the procedure. They don't really talk about, so they say, with this in mind, we examined the density of natural gas gathering and transmission pipelines in the US together with county level data on social vulnerability. So this is great because they say what they're looking at, which was the density of natural gas gathering and transmission pipelines. I think that's what it says because some of it's covered. So, yeah, transmission pipelines. So those are the different variables that they looked at. Those are I would say that those are the outcome variables. And then the dependent variables that they looked at was like the county level data and social vulnerability. They didn't necessarily talk about how they looked at those things, but as we read later, they talk about quartiles. So once they had that data, it looks like they broke it up into quartiles. So 4 different areas of data, and they identified was at the top of the quartile and like the lower quartiles. And it seems like those at the top quartiles were the more socially vulnerable. And then they also had higher pipeline densities. So that's without explicitly saying it, they say what they did to calculate things with their results. So the quartiles or the mathematical things that they did to get their results. So quartiles, great. What about the purpose, results, and conclusion? Purpose, results, and conclusion. I think a good way to find where the results start sometimes are with words like, yep, I think the results follow after the procedure. And that would be right after this, which would be in general. Is it? Let me see. Vulnerability. No, for the 2,261, right? What I was also going to mention is, let me choose a different color. We found is a good indicator of where results start, because they're saying like, this is what we did and this is these are the results that we had. This is what we found. So we found a positive correlation between county level. I think correlation also counts with kind of confusing, but positive correlation also speaks to some of the methods, because it seems like they did some sort of statistical model to see if the different variables were associated. So they did some sort of statistical model, and they found that positive correlation, which is under the results. In general, counties with more socially vulnerable populations have significantly higher pipeline densities than counties with less socially vulnerable populations. In particular, counties in the top quartile of socially vulnerable tend to have pipeline densities that are much higher than pipeline densities for counties in the bottom quartile of social vulnerability. The difference grows larger for counties at the upper extremes of the pipeline density within each group. So going off of what Billy said, if the results were about here, do you think that the conclusions would come after the results? Most times it does, but some people get creative with their writing, but in most cases it does. We discussed some of the implications for the indigenous communities and others affected by recent expansion of oil and gas infrastructure. I'm thinking this is part of the conclusion. And they also talk about what they would do for the future. So they offer recommendations aimed at improving ways in which decision makers identify and address the societal impacts and environmental justice implications of midstream pipeline infrastructure. So I think that this would be where the conclusions are. I'm just going to put C there for conclusions. So PRC. So we got the PRC. Where do you think that the purpose is? I'll use green. So this part up here isn't marked. I wonder what you all are seeing, because I wonder if these boxes are in the way. Oh no, they're not in the way. They're just in the way for me. Okay, let's see. Midstream oil and gas infrastructure comprises vast networks of gathering and transmission pipelines that connect upstream extraction to downstream consumption. In the United States, public policies and corporate decisions have prompted a wave of proposals for new gathering and transmission pipelines in recent years, raising the question, which is here, that signifies that this is the research question here. Who bears the burdens associated with the existing pipeline infrastructure in the US or in the US? So I would argue that this is the purpose here. Although it's not written in the form of like a purpose statement, it still speaks to the reason that they're doing this research. And so the research question here is what's underlined in green. You could even say that this part up here is also part of the purpose because it's giving you context of why this is important. I think I may have labeled it as being part of the background, but that's getting more into like the nitty gritty of things here. Let me see. I'm going to clear this. But yeah, so this would be the purpose here, the procedure, results, the conclusions, and then I labeled this as the background, but again, it could be part of the procedure. Does that make sense? Anyone have any questions? Right, moving on. I have another example. Thank you all for annotating that with me. I'm bringing it back to a previous example that we used in the methods section for our previous presentation. Mohammed had created this research question of wanting to see if a turtle would move faster if it was given the opportunity to eat crickets, or if it was going to be given cantaloupe if it would move faster. So based off of the context that we had for this experiment, I quickly wrote up an abstract that will go through here. And yeah, some of this was taken from the previous video. I don't think that they actually gave us results for this, so some of this is just made up. So take this with a grain of salt, but for the purpose of this activity, it's to show how an abstract is written. So the purpose of this experiment is to compare the average time it takes a red-eared slider turtle to move across its cage when presented with cantaloupe cubes or crickets to see if the turtle will move faster for cantaloupe cubes. I hypothesize that when presented with a cricket once a day for a week, the red-eared slider turtle will move across its tank with a lower average speed than when it's presented with cantaloupe cubes at the same rate on a subsequent week. To conduct this experiment, I fed the turtle a cricket once a day for 1 week and timed how long it took to cross its enclosure to the food. I repeated the steps with the cantaloupe and calculated the average speed for the cricket and cantaloupe trials. The average speed for the cricket was 3 minutes and 15 seconds, which was slower than the cantaloupe average speed, which was 3 minutes and 5 seconds. Possible reasons for why the turtle moved faster for the crickets is the age of the turtle. This turtle is considered young, and studies suggest that younger turtles prefer protein, whereas older turtles prefer vegetation. I will run the study again with a turtle of an older age to see if I get the same results. So I'm going to annotate again. This one is a little bit more done straightforward with the purpose, procedure, results, and conclusions. So in this one, I clearly stated the purpose. I gave the hypothesis here. And let me change color. So that would be the purpose. The procedure was to conduct this experiment. I think also the cantaloupe cubes, the rate, because it shows what mathematical things that I did to get my answers or average speed. Oops, I'm terrible at making these markings. Yeah, cricket variable, how long, um, yeah, basically to here, from here to there for the procedure. I'll do purple for results. So the average speed for the cricket, I only kind of had one sentence for the results here. I'll do pink. And then conclusions, possible reasons. Yeah, this kind of whole part is conclusions. So I tried to explain why the results were the way they were, and also provided a future direction for the study. So if I were going to do this study again, how would I change it? How would I confirm the results? How would I do something that's different? Because again, the process of doing research is a circle. You complete it and you see what can be done to improve or to get different results. And so possibly doing this study again with a different age of a turtle to see if the results are the same or different is what was proposed for this abstract. Any questions so far? It's pretty straightforward, I think. All right, did I skip anything? Nope, okay, so if there aren't any questions, as of this moment, these are some of the upcoming deadlines. So December 8th, we're hoping that you're starting to get together your results, your visuals, and your graphs. If you need help doing any of those, please let me know. Again, you want those to stand alone. If someone looked at them without your paper, is the hope that they understand it without looking at that. We'll have our last workshop on December 9th, our last workshop for this year. We're going to be having university closure and things like that later. And also our student staff are going into finals. So that will be our last workshop for 2025. And we'll pick up in 2026 in January with our other workshops. And we do still have deadlines for December, however, just to keep everyone on track because there are a few science fair deadlines that are in January. So we'll continue to give feedback even if we're not having those workshops, or if you need help, we're still providing support in that way. So you want to have your conclusions and abstract, including your presentation draft, by December 22nd. We'll go through those different things and provide feedback so that you can have your second draft ready for your presentation, and then having the final draft by January 26th. And again, this might be different depending on the science fair that you sign up for, so take that into consideration. And then, so continue working on the tasks in the project guide. This is the link to the project guide here, and it looks like this. You'll basically create that shared document, which is either going to be a Google slide, Microsoft PowerPoint, or iCloud that you share with us. And within that document, there are different due dates in there, and that's how you'll submit your abstract, your results, and your different things in that shared document, so that we can keep track of the different things that you're doing and where we can provide support and feedback. I'll also include that in the chat as well. So summary of what we did today, we discussed what an abstract is and also the requirements. And we also reviewed a few examples to help so that when you do craft yours, you understand the different components that go into it. Again, the next workshop is going to be December 9th, and this is a quote from Joy Harjo. Humans are vulnerable and rely on the kindness of the earth and the sun. We exist together in a sacred field of meaning. Any questions? Any questions? Feel free to put them in the chat if you do have any questions. I'm going to pull up the share or the research guide in case some of you all don't have access to it at the moment. Here is the research guide coming to you all right now. If you need the link. All right, can I talk more about the visuals a little bit more? So the results or photos or what sorts of visuals? Great question. No worries. So, okay. Okay, so you got it. I'll just briefly go over visuals broadly, just in case. So for the visuals for the requirements to submit, that's like if you have graphs that you're using or charts, tables, just sort of how you'll visualize the results. It can also be the photos that you're using in your presentation. If you took pictures of the different samples or locations for where you collected your samples or where you conducted things, or if you're making observations, those sorts of things. So things that you can visually see your results. I hope that makes sense. And to go a little bit further for SARSEF and other science fairs, if you're taking visuals from other sources, they want to make sure that you cite those. And I might have seen that they even want you to cite yourself. It really depends on the science fair. I know for some science fair, if you took the photo and it's like an original photo, then you don't have to cite it, but you could cite yourself if you wanted to, just to avoid any sort of questions. Thanks. Any other questions? Yes, if you decided that you wanted to do something and as you thought about it, you want to change your subject, you certainly can. So it's completely up to you. And that's also part of science is sometimes you think of something and as you process like how am I going to test this, you might decide that it'll take you in a completely different direction. That's how it's been with doing my doctoral work as well. So I've experienced that, and you're perfectly fine to change your subject if you want to. Great question. Any other questions? Oh, I will say, however, once we get started on the paperwork, you should be able to change your topic. You just have to start tracking the changes. Like I started as this, and we changed the research question to this, or whatever. But yeah, it's completely fine to change your topic. Any other questions? If not, I'm gonna. Are you? Oh yes, thank you for the reminder. Okay, so let me pull up the NASEP website. Great. So I went to nasep.arizona.edu. This is our website. And if you go here to research and then you go to virtual workshops, it'll have the different videos. So this is workshop 1, workshop 2, 3. This is kind of 3. I labeled it as 3, but this was actually the admissions workshop that we had with Marwin Clark. And then, yeah, the methods, results, and conclusions. So this was from last week. Yeah, I'll put the link to this in the chat. And as I'm here, you'll also be able to find like the NASEP on a page document, the research project guide here, the pre-assignment as well. Here are some of the posters that students have done in the past. So some examples. However, I think the SARSEF science fair, some of the other science fairs, they've moved away from like poster styles or trifolds. They want like a digital presentation. So same information, just differently displayed. And then, as a friendly reminder, the NASEP application is currently open. So if you know of anyone that wants to participate or is currently a sophomore, because I know that freshmen aren't able to participate. So if they're now rising juniors and seniors, then they can apply. These are our program dates, June 7th to 13th, 2026. We do have a priority deadline, which is March 13th, I believe. But again, we have the program open until all the spots are filled. So even if it's past March 13th, people can still apply if there's still openings. Great questions. Any other questions? If there aren't any, I'm going to pause or stop the recording actually.